So that the broadcast has audio, but just so you know.
Awesome. Well, it is very clear that we have an abundance of amazing people in our school. My face hurts from smiling. There were so many awards given out tonight. So congratulations again, everybody. Anything else, Dr. Moon?
Nope, that concludes.
All right, perfect. All right, that brings us to the business section of our meeting tonight, resolutions. First up in our resolutions, we have the approval of our 2025-2026 school year calendar. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the 2025-2026 school year calendar as presented.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any discussion from the board? Seeing as there is none, Mrs. Strasky, please call our roll.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Dr. Rosello?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Ms. Hardiman?
Yes.
And the motion passes. Next up, we have first reading of policies.
I move that we approve for first reading, the policies as presented. Policies 105, discrimination and harassment based on sex prohibited. 215, Board of Directors, closed session and exempt meetings. Policy 216, notification of board meetings. 219, quorum. 231, activity pass for members of the Board of Directors. 304, participation in policy and administrative regulation development. 502, compulsory attendance and requirements. Policy 903, visitors and volunteers in district buildings. Policy 906, community use of facilities. And finally, policy 909, public complaints. Those are the policies up for review at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Kozire. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion from the board regarding this first reading of policies?
I do have a question on code 304. I'm trying to get to it in my PDF.
It's page 8.
All the way past it. Okay. I did have a question on a couple of the things that we took out, mainly the sentence, "It is the responsibility of the superintendent to ensure administrative regulations are followed." And then also had a question about the board is also responsible for evaluating the effectiveness and efficiency with which the administration and staff implement board policies. I'm just kind of curious who therefore is responsible.
Well, as a board, we're responsible for our policies, so I think that, I don't, it's kind of redundant to say that we're responsible when we already are responsible.
Right, that part, well, just the responsibility to ensure that administrative regulations are followed. Is that our responsibility then? But we're taking that out.
How did we word that? That it wasn't really taken out?
Dr. Murillo, shall I respond? Okay, thank you. The committee's discussion was around the fact that this policy is really about development, not about implementation. And so it seemed a little misplaced in here.
Okay.
And there are other policies that speak to policy implementation. And so that was the purpose for the recommendation to remove it.
Okay, that makes more sense, yeah. So are the other ones, the cross-references down below, the ones that we would look at, or?
This would only pertain to this specific This is regulation development. That's what this code is for, so I'd presume that those cross-references
Other
are
policy.
for regulation
And then
development,
how they're developed,
not for
Right.
implementation.
Okay.
not
we
how
s-
they're implemented or how they are
Regulated.
policed and regulated.
Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Okay, do we happen to know which one is the regulation policy, just to kind of? I mean, I don't need it now,
304
obviously.
point something.
It's probably
Yeah.
in 304,
304?
point whatever. you know.
What's really great about having two readings is the first reading, you can ask these questions, and then we can provide additional information, like answering your question you have,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that the next time you address the policy, you have what information you need to make a decision.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's just kind of my question is, yeah, I knew there's a reason, I just didn't know what it was, so, okay, cool.
I had one question very quickly too. I think it was on 903 on the PDFs we have. It's page 12. The part that crossed out, the district will conduct an annual check of the National Sex Offender Registry on all approved volunteers. I'm assuming is that because the system that we're using, the badge system that has the
Right.
volunteers tracked, will do that.
The Raptor
check?
system will take care of all of that for us.
Okay, and it will do that on a like a recurring basis, not just the first time. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought that
It's
was.
actually a more in-depth
Robust.
system than we can do on our own.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, but when I just saw that was crossed out, I was like, I kind of want to just double check. So,
The other part of that, Mr. Peters, is that we have a 2-year approval cycle. So the formal approval and the reauthorization, resubmission of their information is required every 2 years anyway.
oh, that makes
As
sense.
well, so.
Okay.
Having that one kind of on an off cycle specifically, again, it's the recommendation that it be removed.
Okay, that makes sense. I just wanted to ask the background of that, but thank you.
Great questions, Board. Thank you very much. Any other comments or concerns for this first reading? Awesome. Mrs. Strasky, please call our roll.
Could somebody remind me who made the second?
I did. I did.
I'm sorry about that. I was
That's okay.
eager to answer the question. All right. Mrs. Griner?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Thank you.
And the motion carries. Next, we have renewal of Tyler Technologies contract with asset management. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the contract with Tyler Technologies for finance, HR, and payroll in the amount of $137,403.13 and fixed asset software in the amount of $11,599 as presented.
Thank you.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion from the board?
If I remember right, we talked about this earlier, that with Tyler Technology, I think it was like requirement for the state that we have to use this type of, or not this specific, but the type of software that it's,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. And we're adding, and the reason, usually when a contract just kind of comes up for renewal, it goes into consent, but we pulled it out and put on resolution because we're adding the fixed asset. And that's real important to our auditors, that we have a system that they can pull and look at. So that is a reason that we've added that piece to the Tyler.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Anything further? All right. Mrs. Strasky, please call our roll.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mrs. Griner?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next, we have approval of contract with Unite Public Network for leased lit fiber service to Edison and Wilson. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves the contract with Unite Private Networks for leased lit fiber from building connectivity from TJ High School to Edison and Wilson Schools in the amount of $81,000.
I'll
Second.
second.
A motion and a second. Thank you, Mr. Kozire. Just clarifying for.
It's fine.
Any comment or question from the board regarding this?
Do we want to talk through this like in public?
Sure.
I think for the public, that'd be great. John, would you come up, because the following board item is also for a couple of other schools, and just kind of give an overview of what this means. I know it's E-rate for the community that's watching.
Yeah, so we participate in the E-rate program, which is managed by USAC, which ultimately the FCC manages. And for Cat 1, or Category 1, which the Unite Public and the Cox contract, which are the two items here, we get a 90% discount. So we're only paying 10% of the cost, which is really amazing. And then for the Cat 2 stuff, which is the 25-26 E-rate bid approval, we get between an 80 and 85% approval. What this means is significant savings to our taxpayer. Ultimately, last year, we had over $500,000 that we received because of the E-rate program. And the other piece to that is it's for connectivity. That's the purpose.
Any other questions for Mr. Stiles while he's at the podium? Thank you, Mr. Stiles.
Thank you, John.
All right, any further discussion from the board? Seeing as there is none, Mrs. Strowski, please call our roll.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mrs. Griner?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next up, we have another matter with E-rate. This is approval of contract with Cox Business for leased lit fiber service to Hoover Elementary.
I move that the board approve the contract with Cox Business for leased lit fiber for building connectivity from ALHS to Hoover Elementary in the amount of $51,600.
Thank you.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? As there is none, Mrs. Strowski, please call our roll.
Yes. Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mrs. Griner?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next, we have our last bit of business with E-rate. This would be the 2025-26 E-rate Cat 2 bid approval. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves the bids for Category 2 E-rate, eligible Fortinet gate switch, eligible Fortinet support for 1 year, Ruckus AP support, Meraki's switch license for a year, Cisco license for a year, backup batteries for the elementary schools, and backup batteries for the secondary schools as presented. Oh, yep, there we go. And it's for the dollar amount that I missed earlier of $254,434.41.
Is there a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion regarding the Cat 2 bid?
It's just good to hear what Mr. Stiles mentioned earlier as far as the savings that we're offering to taxpayers. It's great.
Yes. Thank you for that. I had to read this twice, because I thought at first it said Fortnite Gate, and I was like, what are we doing here? Mrs. Strowski, please call our roll.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mrs. Griner?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next up, we have approval of budget guarantee. Is there a motion?
I move that the Board of Directors of Council Bluffs Community School District will levy property taxes for fiscal year 2025-2026 for the regular program budget adjustment as allowed under Code 257.14 Code of Iowa.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion from the board? Just for public knowledge, this is in case enrollment declines or new state aid is low. The increase in funding to the district may be less than 1%, and this is a guarantee of 1% increase in funding to the school. Is that correct, Dr.
That is
Earl?
correct.
Look at you.
Anything further from the board? Mrs. Strowski, please call our roll.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mrs. Griner?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Budget is guaranteed. Next up, we have Health Check 360 Wellness Renewal Contract, 2-year agreement. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves the Health Check 360 Wellness Renewal Contract for 2025, 2027, through 2027.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Thanks, Mr. Peters. Motion and a second. Any discussion from the board? Just in review, this looks like a biometric screening type of company we use for health insurance. Does it provide some kind of reduction in premiums?
Does. It provides, I think it's $100 that our staff saves if they go through the screening. It really focuses around wellness and the health services, kind of that agreement. And just a really great tool for our teachers to be able to access, pushes out tips for our employees and wellness, and Kelly, who kind of oversees it, does a lot of great interaction with our staff. We have a walk day one time a year. We all meet at Wickersham and walk around the track, and just a lot of positive pieces. But this really gives our staff a place to go, and so we appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other discussion from the board? Seeing as there is none. Mrs. Straussky, please call our roll.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Next up, we have a resolution for the approval for the following new job description: CTE Curriculum and Instruction Support Specialist. Is there a motion?
I move that the Board of Directors approve the new job description for the CTE Curriculum and Instruction Support Specialist.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion from the board?
Maybe just noting that this position is replacing a contractor position to a FTE that has a valid Iowa teaching license and CTE endorsements.
Yeah. And one of the pieces in talking with Dr. Matthews and Ms. Colmine is that our CTE and our programs that we keep developing with our pathways are growing and growing. And really to have someone that champions and helps and supports that curriculum, the resources, supporting teachers that are either in our buildings or on the Iowa Western campus. Right now, we work with someone that we contract so many hours with, and it's just, it just needs more, I think, support. And so we love the person we contract with. She's been around our district for many, many years, and she does a fabulous job. But it is time for us to find a full-time position to support this area.
Way to level up. Any further discussion from the board?
Yeah, we did. Goes with the fortnight.
Mrs. Straussky, please call our roll.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Last on our resolution list is SBRC Spending Authority. It's our favorite. Request for special education administrative costs. Is there a motion?
I move that the board requests supplemental spending authority from SBRC in the amount of $63,336.32 for special education administrative cost.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion regarding spending authority request? Please, Dr. Morello.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Lori Leaham and Dr. Tracy Matthews for their attention and requesting any spending authority. We're really trying to work on our special education deficit, and they've made it a priority. So I appreciate your work on this and really making sure that we continue to monitor how we're spending our special education dollars and doing the best we can for our community.
Thank you. Anything further from the board? Mrs. Straussky, please call our roll.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Dr. Ozello?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
And the motion carries. Lastly, we have our consent agenda. Consent agenda includes gratefully acknowledging and accepting donation from Michael Gant, $1,191.10 for his participation through the Union Pacific Fund for Effective Government. Also acknowledging and accepting donation from Grant Novak for $2,547.90 for also participating in Union Pacific Fund for Effective Government. Approval of agreement with William Penn University for student teaching and student clinical experiences. Approval of agreement with West Central Community Action for preschool contracted services. Special education contract with Boys Town Day School. Our personnel agenda, financials, and disbursements for January. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves the consent agenda as presented.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any discussion regarding our consent agenda items? Mrs. Straussky, please call our roll.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Ms. Hardeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kozire?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Dr. Rosello?
Yes.
Mrs. Greiner?
Yes.
Motion carries. And that concludes our meeting. We are adjourned. I sure do.